Hi, and welcome to Chief or Yourself. I'm glad you could be with us today, wherever you happen to be in the world at this moment. Our guest on this program has endured what is commonly called the worst nightmare a parent can experience. Matthew McKay's son, Jordan, was only 23 years old when he was shot and killed. After Jordan's murder, Matthew became determined to listen and look for his dead son in any way he could. He set out on a quest to discover the truth about why we're here and what happens when we die. Matthew McKay is a clinical psychologist, professor at the Wright Institute in Berkeley, and the author of Seeking Jordan, How I Learned the Truth About Death and the Invisible Universe. And beside examining life after death, the book explores the existence of God, notions of heaven and hell, and our purpose for being here. And Matthew, I'll start with what is, I guess, the most painful question, the very first one. If you would give us some background. I believe Jordan was on his way home from work when this happened. Can you set this up for us?
Yeah, Jordan was a computer illustrator, and he was on his way home. It was at night. With his girlfriend in San Francisco. He was on a bike. It looks like four men attacked him, pulled him from his bike. There was quite a struggle, physical struggle, altercation. He broke away from them at one point, began running down the street, and he was shot in the back and died in a doorway trying to get some help.
What were some of the ways of contacting Jordan? Obviously, coming off of such a trauma is difficult, and now you're looking into ways to contact him. What are the ways that you and your wife explored early on to get the process going?
Well, first we just discovered, really without even knowing what was going to happen, that Jordan was making contact with many people in our family, many friends. He was showing up in lots of different ways. In some cases, vivid dreams in which he had very specific messages for people. In other cases, he would show up as literally as a vision. And in one case was he actually physically somehow knocked somebody off their bed and out of the middle of sleep and was present in them. So I mean, he was showing up in different ways. He had very important messages for us, and we learned that even though I think the channel of communication was blocked for us because we were in such deep grief, other people were able to hear, and we took a lot of comfort from that. From there, we, about 6 months after Jordan died, decided to try something to really make contact with him directly ourselves, and we went to see Alan Bodkin, who is had discovered something called induced after-death communication. It uses a technique that's, well, it's very common in psychotherapy called EMDR, desensitization, processing. I use it with my own patients. But he accidentally discovered a small variation on the technique, and what he found was that those who have trauma, but also have traumatic losses, that they had lost someone they loved dearly, when he made this small alteration in the protocol, they would actually hear from the dead. And he actually did a study where he found in 81 out of 83 cases, naive subjects who had this process, loved ones speak. So I was excited and hopeful that this might happen, and we went to Chicago. I went through the procedure, involves moving your eyes back and forth while your eyes are fixated on something and visualizing the most extreme part of the trauma. And for me, I had the experience of hearing Jordan's voice. I heard it as clearly as if he was in the room. The timbre, the quality, the tone of his voice. And he had very specific messages for his mom and myself. So that was the first moment where I found out the two things I think anyone who has lost someone they love dearly wants to know. Does that soul still exist? Are they okay? Are they happy? And Jordan really conveyed that on that occasion.
Now, of course, you're a man of science, and yet hearing about the death of your child can leave you asking God why, or feeling that your children, as I heard when my only sibling transitioned, that you're not supposed to die before your parents do. Did you go through any of those feelings when this happened?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just to not be able to watch him grow up, to not be able to hug him, to not be able to hold him, and the violation of everything that we expect and assume when we have children that somehow they will live on after us, and we send them into a future where we will not be. It was the worst kind of pain. And so discovering that Jordan wasn't gone, that he still looked over us, that he still loved us, that he still could care about how we were and what was happening, and that he was okay. Those were huge changes that lightened me and made me feel like he was not gone.
Yeah, the thing that surprised me about the book more than anything, with such a seemingly heavy topic, is that it's so encouraging. I mean, it's encouraging for you, of course, and what you're experiencing, but it lets others know that this whole process of passing over is not what we think it is. Now, you use something called channeled writing or automatic writing to make contact with Jordan. Talk about a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, channeled writing has been around for thousands of years. It's actually referred to in ancient texts, and it's been used a lot. Actually, William Butler Yeats wrote one of his books in channeled writing. And I didn't know anything about it, but I consulted Ralph Metzner, who's also a psychologist, also an expert on identification. Taught me how to do it in probably 5 minutes. And I went home and did the procedure as he described it. And immediately I actually had the experience of beginning to have a conversation with her, not just where I was passive and I heard from him, or as I had done consulted a medium who then told me what Jordan was saying. But I was actually experiencing a back and forth conversation where I could ask questions and hear from him. And this channel writing is really amazingly simple, and all you need is kind of a place where you can consistently do it, that makes you feel centered, makes you feel grounded. I use a desk that my folks gave me when I was 11, and it connects me to my history, people I love. Then you need some way of fixing your attention. And very well, I have a candle that's behind a blue glass mask that my daughter gave me from Mexico. That just to fix my eyes on something. Then you need a physical object to connect you to the dead, and something that they had or something that they gave you. And in my case, I just used a little business card that Jordan had printed up in high school. It says Jordan McKay, CEO, Omega Technologies. And there was no Omega Technologies, but he had used it to get into all these tech shows. And it reminds me of his audacity and his humor. So I have that little card. That's my physical connection to him. And then you need a process to get receptive. And people use lots of things. Some people use prayer. Some people use a kind of auto-hypnosis where you get yourself into a trance-like state. Other people use meditation. I use Vipassana meditation, just focusing on the breath, attending to my breath and counting it. And waiting till I feel that kind of subjective sense of I'm receptive, I'm ready, I can hear from Jordan. And then I focus my attention on him, on sort of the essence of you could use just an image of the person, how they looked at your mind. I try to focus on his essence, on his soul essence, on just the core feeling of who Jordan is, and the love I have for him. And then I just deliberately allow myself to experience that the channel can open now when I'm ready. And the last thing you need to do is have something you write on, a notebook or paper, and physically write down the question that you have for that loved one. And then just wait receptively for being aware of them, feeling your love for them, letting the channel open. And usually for me, a word will show up, and then several words finishing a sentence, and then a whole string of sentences, and then it'll stop. And that's the end. That's the answer to that question. I write down another question and get the next answer. So it becomes a real dialogue, and it is rather easy to do. And I'm not clairaudient. I have no psychic abilities whatsoever, and yet I have had the experience of having these very deep conversations, hundreds of them, and it, of course, became the subject of much of the book.
Now, you've described yourself as a skeptic, and you were raised, like I was, with a very traditional religious atmosphere. When you and your wife began this journey, did you feel conflicted on that basis about what you were learning?
No, because I felt like I'd always, you know, as an adult, had an agnostic position. I took a position that I did not know. Yes, I grew up, I went to Catholic grammar school, high school, and college. But as an adult, I really felt I did not know, and I just stayed in that position for years. And I've been very interested in science, like randomized controlled trials, and therapy techniques and methods, and I believe in science. But what I discovered when Jordan started to talk to me and tell me about why we're here, nature of the afterlife, reincarnation, and so forth, is that it just made sense to me. It felt like there was some deep truth that I was hearing. And one of the things that was really interesting to me was that, you know, Jordan was very clear that there is no hell or heaven. I mean, there's an afterlife, there's a spirit world. Call that heaven if you want, but it's not where you have harps and angels and people on clouds. It's really a place where souls live and learn, as they do here. Here in this embodied state, souls come to this planet to learn, and Jordan said they don't come for kind of a pass-fail test, like to be saved, and go to heaven or hell. But they come to learn, and not just in one life, but in many lives. And so each life, the purpose of the life is learning. And the vehicle, and this really was made, the vehicle through which we learn actually is pain. That we come to a physical universe because there is no pain in the afterlife, in the spirit world. And pain is a necessary part of how we learn. We learn by failing, by making decisions and trying things, doing things and having them not work out, and having emotional, physical, and relational pain as a result of the decisions we make. And the pain isn't bad. It's not wrong. It's not sin. It's just how we learn. And we come here for the experience of learning, growing, developing.
The book also brings clarity to the idea of karma. And I think people see karma as a sort of cosmic payback system, but you write that we choose life circumstances that will resolve karmic debt. Can you expand a little bit on that idea of karmic debt?
Yeah, Jordan has been very clear with me that karma isn't about getting punished for bad things you did. That karma is really something that is, he says it's essentially the momentum of learning, that the lessons present themselves. Karma serve our lesson plan. It's what we came here to learn, and that lesson plan can continue over a number of different lives. So if we don't learn the lesson in one life, the same lesson will show up in another life, and oftentimes in the same life, the lesson will show up numerous times. And that we keep facing that lesson. It's not failure. It's just that the lesson will continue. The momentum of learning continues until we finally discover a new response, a wiser choice, and a choice that leads to love as opposed to disconnection and hurt and pain. So when we learn that, we actually then move on to the next karmic lesson and the next thing we're working on, which again, those lessons may continue across lifetimes, and the same lesson shows up in a number of lives. The failure to learn a lesson initially is not a sin, it's not wrong, it's not bad, it's just what we have to do. We have to learn by sometimes having things not go very well.
Yeah. Getting back to the word why, you've learned from Jordan that there are a number of reasons that souls leave our plane at a young age. The book gives a list of those reasons. Can you mention some of those for us?
Yes, and well, first of all, I mean, the way this came about was I asked, well, why did you leave early? Why, how, 23, and he's had this beautiful life, and he was very clear that for him in particular, that he had always known this was going to be a short life. We generally, when we choose our next life in the spirit world, have a sense of how long that life will be. And many lives are not long. In fact, you think about it, before the 20th century, about half of all people babies died before they were 5. So, in the course of history, many of our lives have been short. But what he said that for him, this is a short life because, one, he was recovering from a very difficult previous life in which there had been a lot of violence, a lot of fear, and that he needed a life in which he could rebuild his sense of trust and strength, because he'd really gone through a very tough time. He also, and he got that in his life, he also had certain lessons that he was learning very specifically that he could learn quickly. And he actually had, his own lesson plan for this life that had to do with discipline and facing a fear. And those lessons he did learn, and having learned them, he didn't need to stay in his life. Also, he had a short life to teach others things, so his short life was going to impact others and be providing lessons for them. And finally, his next life is one in which he expects a much longer life, and a life in which he's going to need some of these skills that he learned as Jordan. So anyway, there were many reasons, and there are a lot of reasons that other people may have a short life. For example, just to teach a specific lesson to one or several souls that they share that life with, to complete some sort of karma from another life. Now, sometimes, for example, people who struggle with a lot of, they themselves have done hurtful things or cruel things to others, they may choose a relatively short life in which they have some kind of disability, and rely on the kindness of other people and feel a certain sense of helplessness. And those lessons can be learned early, and that life may be relatively short. There are a lot of reasons. Sometimes souls who are getting tired of reincarnating and are reluctant will come for a short life just to sort of stick their toe in the water, so to speak. And other souls, like these children who come into our lives and leave early with terrible problems, cancer and so forth, sometimes they just show up to provide a moment of radiant love, pure love for the people around them, and it's just a great gift that short life they give so much to us. So lots of reasons for short life.
Have you been able to work any of this experience into your approach with your work as a psychologist, your day-to-day work?
Yes, because the thing that Jordan has told me that's the most important thing we can do is try to learn about our life purpose. Why did we come here? What were we learning? In writ large, life purpose is always the same thing. We're coming here to learn how to love in the face of pain, and that's our, in a general way, what we're here and what we're doing. But each of us also comes with specific things that we are learning in our own lesson plan, and things that we may be planning to do actually in relation to others or in relation to the world. And so those are things that it's really important to try to figure out what your life purpose is. And as a therapist, that's really changed how I work with people, because I'm really interested now in helping people figure out how to get back on the path of their life purpose, the reason they're here. I think very often people get depressed and anxious because they've gotten off that path and they've lost contact with their life purpose. When they can get reconnected to it, it can make a huge difference in terms of deep levels of contentment. Even if there's pain, even if they're struggling, even if they've had losses that are just extraordinarily hurtful. Nonetheless, they can reach that level of contentment that comes
One final question, and we'll wrap it up. If you would, leave us with a takeaway from the book, especially for someone who may be just beginning to deal with the loss of someone so close.
But what Jordan has taught me, and what the whole experience of seeking empathy has taught me, is that the cycle of life is never broken. Death is just a transitional process to get us from the physical world to the spirit world. We don't lose anyone. They are all still with us. The ones we love are still with us. They still care for us. They are still watching over us. And they're just a thought away. We can open the channel of communication with the ones we love really any time we think of them. And we can literally ask questions and can hear answers. And they are still with us. We are not alone. We have not been left here. We have not, in any real true sense, had a loss. We are all still together.
Yeah. Where would we find your website?
Website is seekingjordan.com.
Seekingjordan.com. And you and Jordan obviously keeping up the contact. Plans for another book coming up?
We're working on a kind of, I can't call it a psychotherapy, it's a spiritual therapy group that will teach kids, especially for people who are doing some post-traumatic learning, had a lot of trauma in their lives, and now trying to learn how to put their lives back together again. We developed together a lot of input from him, a little 10-week group to help people grow spiritually and identify their life purpose and find ways to stay in alignment with that life purpose.
All right. Well, this book is Seeking Jordan, How I Learned the Truth About Death and the Invisible Universe, from our guest, Matthew McKay. And Matthew, thanks for being with us and also giving us a touching and, as I said before, a very encouraging story. So much to think about and so much for all of us to experience. So I'll invite you to please come back and talk with us again. We enjoy that.